So, Lone Rider here, and wanted to briefly talk about three fourth wall breaks in the X-Files 2016 miniseries, which I think detracted immeasurably from it. First one is the least detractive, the one that I think did the least damage to the show. But it's the one that I think was most jarring, and I'll explain. My cell phone, the ringtone is the X-Files theme song. In the season 10 episode, 2016 episode, Mulder and Scully Meet the Weremonster, there's a scene where Mulder is lying on the ground in a cemetery next to a tombstone. And the X-Files theme song starts playing. And Mulder reaches for his cell phone and answers the call. Now, what's funny is, because that's the ringtone on my cell phone, as I was watching this, I immediately reached for my cell phone. And it pulled me out of the show, because it's like, oh wait, I gotta take a break from the show, my phone's ringing. And then I realized, wait a minute, it's the character on the show. It's Fox Mulder's cell phone. And sure enough, that's what it was. So it pulled me out of the show, and it was more noticeable to me than probably any of the others, because it happens to be my cell phone ringtone, and I literally thought it was my phone ringing. But why is this a fourth wall break? Well, because what it's essentially saying is that in the X-Files' own fictional universe, the X-Files theme song is a thing. You know, I mean, that's about as fourth wall breaking as Deadpool. Nothing against Deadpool, just saying. Fourth wall breaks haven't really been a thing in the X-Files. It's been its own self-contained universe. And to be fair, to pull off a fourth wall break, you have to do it just right. This didn't. It was the most noticeable to me, but at the same time, I think it was the least destructive to the show, because it's a catchy ringtone. Yes, the message it sent is that in the X-Files fictional universe, the X-Files theme song is a thing, which is confusing. But it didn't. It was just kind of cheesy humor and kind of neat in a way, but it didn't. Yes, it broke the fourth wall, but I don't think it did really any damage to the ability to tell enjoyable stories or care about the characters or anything like that. It just pulled me out of the show for a second. Moving on. The second fourth wall break is in that same cemetery scene. Again, from the episode Mulder and Scully Meet the Weremonster, where the headstone that Mulder's lying next to on the ground is for Kim Manners. Now, Kim Manners is an individual who was actually involved in the production of the X-Files for many years. So again, is the X-Files saying that within its own fictional universe, the X-Files as a TV show is the thing? Just a thought. And again, it's a fourth wall break that isn't really all that bad in terms of affecting storytelling going forward, but it does. If you know about the show and about the people involved, you're going to recognize that name, and you're going to be like, wait a minute, right? I mean, the only way they could have made it more blatant is to have it, be David Duchovny's own tombstone or something. Now, that said, if you just watch the show and you don't know anything about the people involved in producing and filming it, you might not know who Kim Manners is, and that might have just gone past you. You figure, well, it's a random tombstone. But yeah, if you know anything about the show, you're going to look at that and you're going to be like, that's fourth wall break. Again, the X-Files is referencing itself as a fictional program and the people responsible for producing it within its fictional universe. But again, I don't think it, like all fourth wall breaks that are poorly done, it pulled me out of the program for a moment. But I don't think it impacted the ability to tell stories going forward, to care about the characters. And then there's the third fourth wall break, which is Scully's quip in the same episode. Man, this episode had a lot of fourth wall breaks. Scully's quip in the same episode that, don't worry about me, I'm immortal, remember? This goes back to early and mid-series X-Files episodes Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose and Tithonius, respectively. In the first one, they're dealing with a case where there's a serial killer and there's an insurance salesman who apparently is able to know how people are going to die. And Scully at one point asks him, "How do I die?" And he says, "You don't." Well, like most fans at the time, I took that to simply be an enigmatic way of saying that she wasn't going to die within that episode. In particular, within the lifespan of the Clive Bruckman character, who dies at the end of that episode. Belated spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, it's like 20 years old. But the thing is that I never took that to mean she doesn't die, period, like she's immortal. I took that to mean, and I think most fans at the time did, that as far as he could see, she wasn't going to die. And since he died at the end of the episode, he's incapable of seeing further than that, which means that she at least wasn't going to die in that episode. In fact, you could argue in the context of that episode, that it's very clear that it didn't mean that Scully wasn't going to die, period, just not in that episode. And then Tithonius comes along, and this one follows the story of a photographer who basically cheated death inadvertently and has been trying to catch up to it by taking pictures of crime scene fatalities, amongst other things. And it's a really good story with a really creepy vibe, and it's really well done. And one of my favorite episodes, just kind of like Clyde Bruckman was one of my favorite episodes. But at the end, again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, it's many years old. There's a scene where Scully is mistakenly shot by one of the agents she's working with when they come to raid Mr. Fellig or Fenig, I think is his name, the photographer's house. Alfred Fenig, yeah. And here's the problem. The photographer, who's not going to die, is looking at Scully, and she's clearly going to die. And then he says, "Don't look at death." And he looks up and he's sort of in a sort of shocked state, and then he dies. And she ultimately survives, and at the end, she's in the hospital, and the doctors are telling Mulder and her that it's like the fastest recovery that anyone's ever seen. From these two episodes, there's been a fan theory that developed that Scully's basically immortal and can't die. And, like a lot of fan theories, it's a little silly, but it's kind of neat to, speculate and wonder and whatever. But it's a fan theory. This wasn't part of X-Files canon. And then to reference it in the episode, "Oh, don't worry, Mulder, I can't die." A third fourth wall break in that same episode, but this one impacts your ability to tell stories going forward. If the character of Dana Scully knows that she cannot die, one, what is she doing referencing a fan theory which doesn't exist in her universe? Because in her universe, fictional universe, she's a real person, not a character. Secondly, if the character of Dana Scully knows that she cannot die, there's no suspense going forward. It would be like if Mulder found out he was invincible, or anybody else. You don't care about the character then, because there's no risk, there's no danger, there's no struggle to be overcome, right? If she's in a shootout with a bad guy, you're like, "Well, why should I care? She's going to live." If she's, falls victim to an illness, gets poisoned, thrown off a rooftop, no problem, she won't die. Part of what made the X-Files great was its suspense and the fact that its characters weren't superheroes. They were regular people who were just really determined to get to the bottom of things, and they faced mortal danger every time they did so. There's many jokes about how many times Mulder and Scully have, nearly died in the series, or potentially even died and been revived. But, like the old joke, Mulder gets killed at least once every year. But the thing is that the reason we can care about these characters is because we're sort of like on the edge of our seats wondering, will they make it, right? And if you have the character in the fictional show announce, "Oh, I'm immortal, don't worry," it's impossible to have that degree of suspense going forward and really to care about the characters. So, yeah, I mean, the new seasons of the X-Files were poorly done anyway. Bad writing, bad, there were a couple good moments, I'm going to be honest, in season 10, but a couple of good moments don't make up for 6 bad episodes. And of course, there was the over politicalization and part of that, and then into season 11, which I didn't even see. But the point is that these are bad seasons, right? Season 10 and 11, they're bad X-Files. I would argue they're not even the X-Files. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned, they've killed the X-Files going forward for me. I'm going to continue to enjoy the old ones, but I'm not going to watch anything new. As far as I'm concerned, continuity stops at season 9. But it's not just because of the over politicalization and the bad writing and stuff like that there, and the wooden acting, and the breaks in continuity. It's also things like these fourth wall breaks. And the first two they didn't really impact the ability to tell a good story, right? They were quirky, they were poorly done humor, I guess. Yes, they were fourth wall breaks that were poorly done, and therefore they pulled you out of the fictional universe of the show. But they didn't impact your ability to care about the characters going forward in any stories they might choose to tell in the future. The third fourth wall break, with Dana Scully basically saying, "Hey, I'm immortal, remember that fan theory," does. Not just because it's a fourth wall break, but because it's a fourth wall break that announces to the world that we have no reason to care about her character or worry about the things she encounters on a daily basis during the X-Files adventures. So, yeah. 3 fourth wall breaks that really screwed up the 10th season beyond how it was already screwed up. So, Lone Rider,